In a distant part of the galaxy, a vast coalition known as the Galactic Alliance has flourished. Comprising hundreds of peaceful species, the Alliance is a symbol of unity and technological advancement. These species have thrived through centuries of cooperation, diplomacy, and shared knowledge. War is a distant concept for them, conflicts are resolved through discussions, and defense is maintained through technological superiority. Violence is regarded as a primitive failure, a flaw of less advanced civilizations. But there's one species that doesn't quite fit the Alliance's mold: humanity. Humans were late to the galactic stage, only discovering faster-than-light travel within the last century. When they first entered the Alliance, they were greeted with a mix of fascination and caution. Humanity's history was one of survival against all odds, endless wars, harsh environments, and the drive to overcome every challenge. Other species saw humanity as a paradox, technologically advanced, yet still deeply tied to their instincts. For humans, survival wasn't just a concept, it was a legacy. And that legacy earned them a nickname among the alien races: Master Predator. This title wasn't just for show. The Alliance soon realized that humans were different from the peaceful species that made up the majority of the coalition. Their adaptability was unmatched, their ability to endure and even thrive in hostile conditions unparalleled. They didn't just survive, they dominated. Humans were driven by a will to succeed at any cost, a drive that other species found both fascinating and terrifying. However, humanity's rise in prominence wasn't without conflict. Many of the older species within the Alliance viewed humans as a necessary evil. They respected their strength but feared what would happen if that strength went unchecked. For all their advances in diplomacy and technology, the Alliance had never encountered a species that carried such a raw instinct for survival. It was only a matter of time before these instincts would be put to the test. Far on the edge of known space, the vanac, an ancient and warlike species, had begun their expansion. The vanac were nothing like the peaceful races of the Alliance. They didn't negotiate. They didn't seek harmony. They conquered. Entire planets fell to their fleets, civilizations wiped out without a second thought. The Alliance, unprepared for such an existential threat, watched in horror as one by one, member worlds were overrun. The vanac didn't care for the diplomatic solutions that had kept the Alliance intact for so long. Their fleets moved with terrifying efficiency, their technology geared towards destruction and dominance. No amount of reasoning or technological superiority seemed to matter. The vanac didn't want peace. They wanted control. It became clear that the Alliance's peaceful ways wouldn't be enough to stop this threat. Discussions were held, debates ran long into the nights, but there was one conclusion they all feared reaching: they would have to turn to humanity. Despite their unease, the Alliance needed the Master Predator to defend them. No other species had the instincts, the drive, or the willingness to fight as ruthlessly as the situation demanded. The request for help was sent to Earth, and humanity answered. But this wasn't a simple call to arms. Humanity had integrated into the Alliance and adopted many of its values. They had left behind their history of endless war, choosing instead to contribute their scientific advances and strategic insights to the peaceful coalition. Now, they were being asked to unleash the very instincts that the Alliance had long feared. For humanity, the decision wasn't easy. They had come so far, grown so much, but deep down, they knew what needed to be done. The vanac weren't just an enemy. They were a force of destruction that would stop at nothing until every last species in the Alliance was wiped out or subjugated. There was no room for hesitation. The time had come for the Master Predator to rise once again. And so, the leaders of Earth made their choice. Humanity would lead the charge against the vanac, but it wouldn't be without a cost. The soldiers, scientists, and diplomats selected for the mission knew they were about to walk a fine line. On one hand, they had to protect the Alliance and its values. On the other, they had to embrace the very nature that had made them so feared. The question now wasn't whether humanity could win. It was what they would become in the process. The call for humanity's help echoed across the Galactic Alliance. While the other species hesitated, their diplomatic channels buzzing with worry, the humans prepared for what they knew was inevitable. The vanac threat wasn't something that could be reasoned with, nor could it be ignored. Diplomacy had failed, and the alliance was out of options. Humanity was the last card left to play. The leaders of Earth gathered to discuss the request. The meeting was tense, filled with a deep sense of foreboding. On one side there were those who believed that this was their responsibility, that they had a duty to protect not just humanity, but the entire alliance. They had joined the alliance not just for their own survival, but because they believed in something greater. On the other side were those who feared what this battle would require. Unleashing their primal instincts, their predatory nature, wasn't something to be taken lightly. Humanity had fought hard to rise above its violent past, to prove that it was more than a war-driven species. Now, they were being asked to go back to that place, to become the very thing they had tried to leave behind. Ultimately, the decision was made: humanity would fight. But this wasn't a simple declaration of war. This was a calculated move, a step into an unknown future. Humanity had always adapted, always survived, but now they faced a dilemma. Could they protect the alliance without losing their own sense of morality? Could they embrace their predatory instincts without being consumed by them? The first step was assembling a team, an elite group of soldiers, scientists, and diplomats who would lead humanity's efforts. Each member of this team represented a different facet of what it meant to be human. The soldier was hardened, experienced in the art of war, but weary of the toll it took on the soul. The diplomat believed in humanity's potential for peace, constantly balancing the fine line between cooperation and conflict. The scientist, driven by logic and reason, sought solutions that wouldn't just win the war but preserve what humanity had worked so hard to build. As the team prepared to depart, the weight of the decision became clear. The Alliance was watching, and so were the vanac. Humanity's actions in the coming days would define not only their future but the future of the entire galaxy. There would be no turning back once the first shot was fired. The team knew they had to win, but they also knew that victory would come at a cost. When the team arrived at the Alliance's command center, they were greeted with a mix of relief and fear. The alien leaders welcomed them, but there was an unspoken tension in the room. The other species had always viewed humans as a necessary ally, one that could be called upon in times of great need but one that they never fully trusted. Now, that mistrust lingered in the air. They needed humanity's help, but they feared what that help might look like. The human diplomat spoke first, addressing the council with a tone of calm reassurance. She reminded them that humanity had come far since its early days of conflict, that they had joined the Alliance to build a better future, and that they would fight to protect that future. But she didn't sugarcoat the truth. The vanac were not like the enemies the Alliance had faced before. They would not stop until every world had fallen under their control. The only way to stop them was to fight, ruthlessly and without hesitation. The alien leaders listened in silence, their expressions betraying their unease. They knew the diplomat was right. The vanac weren't a problem that could be solved through negotiation or technological superiority. This was a fight for survival, and survival required sacrifice. The human soldier took the floor next. His words were blunt, lacking the diplomat's tact, but no less powerful. He didn't speak of hope or ideals. He spoke of war. He told the council what they needed to hear, that humanity was ready to do whatever was necessary to win. But he also warned them that the Alliance needed to understand what that meant. This wouldn't be a clean fight. There would be casualties, not just on the battlefield, but in the Alliance's collective conscience. They would have to make choices that went against everything they believed in, choices that would haunt them long after the war was over. The scientists followed, presenting the cold, hard facts. The vanac were advancing faster than anticipated, and the Alliance's defenses were crumbling. Without a new strategy, the galaxy would fall within months. But there was a solution. Humanity had developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to counter the vanac's strengths. These strategies weren't just about brute force. They were about using humanity's greatest asset, its adaptability. The vanac were powerful, but they were predictable. They had relied on their overwhelming strength for so long that they didn't know how to adapt to a new kind of warfare. Humanity would exploit that weakness. As the council deliberated, the human team waited. They knew the decision had already been made, but there was still the question of trust. Could the Alliance trust humanity to lead them in this war? And more importantly, could humanity trust itself? In the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would take command of the Alliance's defense. The Council members, though still wary, recognized that there was no other choice. The vanac were a force unlike anything the galaxy had seen, and only humanity had the instincts and the will to stop them. But as the team left the command center, they couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The Alliance had placed its future in the hands of the Master Predator, and there was no guarantee that the galaxy would ever be the same again. Humanity's forces were mobilized faster than anyone could have predicted. The Alliance had expected a sluggish transition, but the humans were far more prepared than they had let on. This wasn't a battle they had anticipated, but it was a scenario they had trained for countless times. Within days, human fleets were positioned across the most vulnerable sectors, ready to engage the vanac. The other species watched in awe and fear as humans transformed the Alliance's military into a precision war machine, something they had never seen before. When the first vanac fleet approached a strategic outpost, the Alliance braced itself for the worst. For centuries, their ships had been built for defense, their strategies revolving around protection, not aggression. But humanity brought something new to the table. They didn't wait for the enemy to strike. Instead, they launched a preemptive strike, something the vanac hadn't expected. Human warships descended upon the vanac with a ferocity that shocked not only the enemy but the entire Alliance. Tactical ambushes, coordinated strikes, and rapid adaptation to the changing battlefield turned what was supposed to be a slow, defensive struggle into a relentless assault. The vanac, for all their power and numbers, had never faced an enemy that fought like this. The battle raged on, but it was clear that humanity had taken control. The vanac were fierce, but they relied on brute force and overwhelming numbers. Humanity, on the other hand, used their ingenuity, exploiting the weaknesses of the vanac's predictable tactics. Human commanders, unburdened by the constraints of Alliance protocol, devised plans that the more peaceful species couldn't even comprehend. Guerrilla tactics, decoy fleets, and daring maneuvers became the norm, and soon the vanac were on the back foot. The Alliance marveled at humanity's ability to adapt. While the vanac followed rigid patterns, the humans evolved with each skirmish. Every battle was a lesson, every loss a step toward victory. The humans treated warfare like a living organism, one that could grow and change depending on the environment. And in that environment, they thrived. However, the brutality of the conflict began to take its toll. As much as the humans succeeded in pushing back the vanac, the cost was high. Casualties mounted, and the human soldiers found themselves going to darker places than they had ever imagined. The Alliance members, though grateful for humanity's intervention, began to grow uneasy. They saw the ruthlessness with which humans fought, and wondered if they had unleashed something far more dangerous than the vanac. In one particularly vicious battle, a human fleet found itself surrounded. Outnumbered and outgunned, any other species would have surrendered or retreated. But not the humans. Instead, they lured the vanac into a trap. Using their own ships as bait, they drew the enemy closer and closer, all the while preparing for a final strike. When the moment came, the humans detonated their decoy fleet, creating a massive explosion that crippled the vanac forces. The survivors were quickly dispatched, leaving the battlefield littered with wreckage. The victory was decisive, but the method was shocking. The other species in the Alliance could barely comprehend the level of sacrifice the humans were willing to make. To them, it was unthinkable to destroy their own ships, to risk so many lives for the sake of a tactical advantage. But for the humans, it was just another day in the fight for survival. As the war continued, the vanac began to realize that they were no longer dealing with the same Alliance they had encountered at the start. Humanity had transformed the battlefield, turning what had once been a predictable conflict into a chaotic struggle where every engagement was a new challenge. The vanac, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves cornered, unsure of how to respond to an enemy that refused to play by the rules. Humanity's strategies weren't just about brute force. They were about psychology. The vanac were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They believed in their own invincibility, and the humans exploited that arrogance at every turn. Ambushes were designed not just to destroy, but to demoralize. Every battle left the vanac more uncertain, more afraid. Their once unbreakable morale began to crumble. The Alliance was winning, but at what cost? The other species had never seen warfare on this scale, never witnessed the lengths to which humanity would go for victory. The human soldiers, while celebrated as heroes, became more and more distant from the ideals of the peaceful coalition. They had embraced their predatory nature, and while it was saving the Alliance, it was also changing them. The human diplomat, who had once argued for a balanced approach, watched with growing concern. Victory was important, yes, but how far would humanity go? And what would be left of them once the war was over? She spoke with the soldiers, the commanders, trying to remind them of the values they had once shared with the Alliance. But the war had taken its toll on them as well. They had seen too much, lost too much. For them, survival was all that mattered now. As the vanac retreated from one sector after another, the Alliance began to celebrate. The threat was receding, and for the first time in months, there was hope. But for the humans, the end was still far off. They knew that the vanac would regroup, that the final battle was yet to come. And when it did, they would have to be ready to finish what they had started. The vanac were unlike any enemy the Alliance had ever faced, but humanity had proven to be unlike any ally they had ever imagined. They had taken the fight to the enemy, pushed them back, and shown the galaxy what it meant to be a master predator. But as the war dragged on, it became clear that victory would come at a price, one that humanity would have to pay long after the last battle was won. As the war neared its conclusion, the vanac were in retreat, their forces scattered and demoralized. The once invincible enemy was now struggling to hold on to its remaining territory, and the Alliance, led by humanity, had the upper hand. But victory, as the humans had known from the beginning, was not without consequence. The final steps of the campaign would be the hardest, not because of the enemy, but because of what was left of the people fighting it. The human leaders gathered once again to assess the situation. The war had been brutal, but the end was in sight. Still, there was a growing sense of unease among them. The diplomat, once a firm believer in humanity's role as a protector of the Alliance, could no longer ignore what the war had done to their people. The soldiers, now hardened by battle, had become distant, even cold. They spoke of the enemy with a kind of detachment that worried her. The scientist, usually calm and logical, had grown frustrated, seeing the cost of war not just in lives but in the future they had once envisioned for humanity. There was no denying that humanity had saved the Alliance, but the question now was at what cost. The human soldiers had done things that no other species in the Alliance could imagine, had made sacrifices that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The Alliance itself was grateful for their efforts, but there was a palpable tension between humanity and the other species. Some feared the humans, others respected them, but none truly understood what had driven them to fight as they had. The final battle was approaching, and the vanac had retreated to their home system, where they planned to make their last stand. It was a desperate move, one that signaled the end of the war. But humanity knew that the vanac, even in defeat, were still dangerous. They wouldn't go down easily, and there was no room for mercy. As the human fleet prepared for the assault, there was a sense of finality in the air. The soldiers, though exhausted, were determined to finish the fight. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now. The Alliance, though hesitant, had put its trust in humanity once more. The other species would provide support, but they had made it clear that this was humanity's battle to win. The assault on the vanac homeworld was swift and brutal. The humans, using every tactic they had honed over the course of the war, struck with precision and force. The vanac, despite their preparations, were no match for the sheer will and adaptability of their enemy. Within days their defenses crumbled, and their leadership was captured. The war was over. But victory, as the human diplomat had feared, came at a cost. The destruction left in the wake of the final battle was immense, and the toll on the human soldiers was clear. They had won, but they had also lost something along the way. The diplomat, watching the aftermath of the battle, couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had crossed a line that they might never be able to return from. The vanac were defeated, but the Alliance was left to pick up the pieces. The other species, though grateful for humanity's efforts, were wary of what the future held. The humans had proven themselves to be the ultimate predators, capable of things that the other species couldn't fathom. And while that had saved the galaxy, it had also set humanity apart from the rest of the Alliance in a way that couldn't be undone. As the leaders of the Alliance gathered to discuss the future, the human diplomat found herself at the center of the debate. The other species were divided. Some wanted to reward humanity, to give them a more prominent role in the Alliance. Others were fearful, unsure of what humanity might do now that the war was over. The vanac had been a common enemy, but now that they were gone, the question remained, could the Alliance truly trust a species that had shown such ruthlessness in the face of conflict? The diplomat, torn between her loyalty to her people and her commitment to the Alliance, knew that humanity's future was uncertain. They had proven their strength, but in doing so, they had also isolated themselves. The other species, though thankful, would always look at them with a sense of unease. The soldiers, who had once been seen as protectors, were now seen as something more dangerous. The scientists, watching the debates unfold, couldn't help but reflect on the choices they had made. The war had forced humanity to tap into its most primal instincts, to become the predators the galaxy had feared. But now that the war was over, the question remained, could they return to what they once were? Could humanity reintegrate into the peaceful Alliance, or were they destined to remain on the outside, forever changed by the war? The human soldiers, now returning home, were hailed as heroes by their people, but they too felt the weight of what they had done. The war had taken its toll on them, not just physically but mentally. They had fought, they had survived, but they had also lost a part of themselves in the process. The battles had been won, but the cost of those victories would be felt for generations. In the end, the galaxy was safe, but the Alliance had been forever changed. Humanity, once seen as a necessary ally, was now viewed as something far more complex. They were the master predator, the species that had saved the galaxy, but they were also a reminder of the price of survival. The Alliance, though united in victory, was now divided in its perception of humanity. Some saw them as saviors, others as a potential threat. The future of the Alliance, and humanity's place within it, was uncertain. The vanac were gone, but the scars of the war remained. The galaxy would rebuild, but it would do so with the knowledge that there was a species among them capable of things they could barely comprehend. And for humanity, the question remained, had they saved the Alliance, or had they simply delayed the inevitable?